The phone call that changed Daniel Carter's life came from the White House, but when it came, Daniel wasn't sitting in an office, wearing a suit, or waiting for some important news. He was sitting on a cold concrete bench, inside the county jail. His shoes had been taken. His belt was gone. The only thing he could think about was his 8-year-old daughter waiting outside her school, wondering why her father had never come to pick her up just 6 hours earlier. Daniel had been an ordinary single dad trying to survive another ordinary Tuesday. He was 38 years old and lived in the small town of Brookfield, Virginia, with his 2 children. His daughter, Emma, was 8. His son, Noah, was 13. 3 years earlier, Daniel's wife, Rachel, had died after a long illness. From that day forward, Daniel had become everything at once: father, cook, driver, homework helper, laundry expert, and on bad nights, the person who sat beside his children's beds and tried to answer questions he didn't know how to answer. Dad, Emma once asked him, "Do you think Mom can still see us?" Daniel had looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I hope so." Emma smiled. "Then I'm going to make her proud." Daniel had turned away before. She could see the tears in his eyes. Life after Rachel was never easy. Daniel worked as a maintenance supervisor at a local apartment complex. He fixed broken heaters, leaking pipes, damaged doors, and almost anything else tenants called about. The salary wasn't great, but the job gave him enough flexibility to get his children to school most mornings and pick them up in the afternoon. Every dollar had a purpose. Rent, groceries, Emma single quotes s school supplies, Noah's soccer shoes, an old family minivan that seemed to need a new repair every month. Daniel kept a notebook in the kitchen where he wrote down every expense. If Noah needed $20 for a field trip, Daniel adjusted the grocery budget. If the van needed an oil change, he waited another month before buying new work boots. His own needs always came last, Noah had noticed. One Saturday morning, he watched his father tape the side of an old work shoe where the sole had started separating. "Dad, just buy new ones." Daniel smiled. "These still have a few miles left." "You always say that, because it's usually true." Noah looked at him seriously. "You don't have to spend everything on us." Daniel stopped. For a moment, he saw Rachel in his son's face. He put down the tape. "Yes," he said quietly, "I do." That Tuesday started normally. Daniel woke at 5:45. He made scrambled eggs, burned pieces of toast, reminded Noah 3 times to take his science project, and spent nearly 10 minutes looking for Emma's missing shoe. It was under the couch, of course. At 7:20, they climbed into the minivan. Emma talked the entire drive. Noah wore headphones and pretended not to listen. Before Emma got out at Brookfield Elementary, she leaned between the front seats. "Don't forget today." Daniel looked at her. "What am I forgetting?" Her mouth fell open. "Dad," he laughed. "I'm kidding." That afternoon, Emma was receiving a school award for kindness. Daniel had promised to be there at 3:30. She said, "I'll be there, promise." Daniel held out his little finger. "Promise." He had no idea that less than 4 hours later, he would be in handcuffs. At around 11:30, Daniel's supervisor asked him to pick up a replacement water pump from a hardware supplier across town. Daniel took the company pickup truck and headed toward the highway. A sheriff's cruiser pulled behind him. Blue lights flashed. Daniel frowned. He checked his speed. 40-3 and a 45. He pulled over. A deputy approached the window. "License and registration." Daniel handed them over. "Did I do something wrong, officer?" "Stay in the vehicle." The deputy returned to his patrol car. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Daniel checked the clock. He still had plenty of time. Then another patrol vehicle arrived. Daniel's stomach tightened. 2 deputies approached him. "Mr. Carter, step out of the vehicle." Daniel slowly opened the door. "Can I ask what this is about?" "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Daniel stared at him. "What? You have an outstanding warrant." "That's impossible." "Hands behind your back." Daniel felt the metal cuffs close around his wrists. His heart began pounding. "There has to be a mistake. I've never been arrested. You can explain that at the station. I have 2 kids." The deputy guided him toward the cruiser. "I'm supposed to pick up my daughter from school." "No answer, please. At least let me call someone. You'll get a phone call when you're processed." Daniel sat in the back of the cruiser, watching strangers drive past. He felt embarrassed, even though nobody knew who he was. At the sheriff's office, Daniel learned that the warrant was connected to a man named Daniel R. Carter. Man was wanted for violating probation after a fraud conviction in another county. Daniel immediately shook his head. "My middle name is James." The desk officer looked at the computer. "Date of birth matches. What about the photo?" "We're checking." Daniel leaned forward. "Check the social security number. Check fingerprints. Check anything you want. It isn't me." But the department's computer system showed enough matching information that the sheriff ordered Daniel held until the neighboring county confirmed his identity. Daniel tried to stay calm until he saw the clock. 2:48 p.m. "My daughter gets out soon." The deputy avoided his eyes. "Can I make my call?" A few minutes later, Daniel was allowed to use the phone. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. "Maria, I need a favor." She immediately heard something in his voice. "What happened?" "I'm at the sheriff's office." There was silence. "What?" "It's a mistake. I'll explain later." "Can you get Emma from school?" "Of course. And Noah gets home around 4. Tell him I'm okay, Daniel. Are you?" Daniel looked at the concrete wall. Yes, it was a lie. At 3:36, Daniel knew Emma would be standing outside the school building. She would be holding her little certificate, looking for the old blue minivan. Looking for him, Daniel had promised. That thought hurt more than the handcuffs. By evening, he had been transferred into a holding cell. The identity confirmation had still not arrived. Daniel asked again, "Please check the fingerprints." "We're waiting on the other county column. We already sent the request. My children are at home without me." "They're with an adult, correct?" "That isn't the point." The deputy looked tired. "I understand." "No," Daniel replied. "You don't." Then he sat down. For the first time all day, Daniel covered his face with his hands. He had spent 3 years trying to convince his children that even without their mother, they were safe, that he would be there, that they could depend on him, and tonight he wasn't there. At Daniel's house, Emma was sitting at the kitchen table with her award beside her. She hadn't opened the small chocolate cupcake Mrs. Alvarez had bought for her. Noah stood by the window. "When is Dad coming home?" Mrs. Alvarez tried to sound calm. "Hopefully soon." "Why did the police take him?" "They think they made a mistake." Emma looked up. "Dad doesn't do bad things." "I know, sweetheart." "Then why is he in jail?" Mrs. Alvarez had no answer. Noah walked into the hallway and called his father's phone again. It went straight to voicemail. He listened to the familiar recording. "Hey, this is Daniel. Leave a message and I'll call you back." Noah waited for the beep. Then his voice changed. "Dad, Emma thinks she did something wrong because you didn't come." He swallowed up. "Told her you didn't forget." Silence. "She got the kindness award." Noah looked toward the kitchen. "She wanted you to see it." He stopped the message before his father could hear him cry. Inside the jail, Daniel had no idea that message existed. Dinner was a small tray with potatoes, bread, vegetables, and something Daniel barely touched. Around 8, a correctional officer came to his cell. "You have a call." Daniel hurried to the phone. It was Noah. "Dad." Daniel closed his eyes. "Hey buddy, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Are you in a cell?" Daniel hesitated. "Yeah." "Did you do something?" "No." "Listen to me carefully. I didn't do anything wrong. I knew that." Daniel smiled sadly. "How's your sister?" There was a pause. "She won't talk much. Put her on." A few seconds later, he heard a tiny voice. "Dad." "Hey Peanut, you forgot." Those 2 words nearly broke him. "No, Emma, I didn't forget, you promised." "I know everyone else had their moms and dads there." Daniel pressed his forehead against the wall beside the phone. "I was trying to get there. The police stopped me because they thought I was somebody else." "Are you coming home tonight?" Daniel looked toward the guard. Nobody had given him an answer. "I'm trying," Emma sniffed. "Can you still see my award? I want to see it more than anything. I saved a good dad." "Yeah, I'm scared." Daniel took a slow breath. "So am I." He immediately regretted saying it, but Emma surprised him. "That's okay. You always say people can be scared and still be brave." Daniel couldn't speak for several seconds. "That's right. So be brave, Dad." The call ended. Daniel sat on the edge of the bench afterward and stared at the floor. He had dealt with grief, bills, loneliness, nights when both children were sick, days when he worked 10 hours and still came home to cook dinner, but being unable to reach them felt different. He felt powerless. Meanwhile, outside the jail, the situation was beginning to attract attention. Daniel's employer had called the sheriff's office after learning what happened. His supervisor confirmed Daniel had worked at the apartment complex for nearly 9 years. Mrs. Alvarez contacted an attorney she knew from church. The school principal also called after hearing that Daniel had missed Emma's ceremony because of the arrest. But there was another detail almost nobody in Brookfield knew about. 6 months earlier, heavy flooding had hit several communities in Virginia. Daniel had been driving home from work when he saw a school bus trapped near a flooded section of road. Water was rising around it. Before emergency crews arrived, Daniel and 2 other motorists helped get 11 children and the driver through the rear emergency exit and onto higher ground. Daniel never considered himself a hero. When a local reporter tried to interview him, he said only anybody who saw those kids would have helped. But the story spread. Months later, Daniel and the other 2 civilians were nominated for a National Public Service recognition honoring ordinary citizens who had acted during emergencies. Daniel had almost forgotten about it then. 2 weeks before his arrest, an official envelope had arrived. He thought it was junk mail. Noah opened it. "Dad." Daniel was washing dishes. "What?" "This says Washington." Daniel wiped his hands. The letter invited him and his children to attend an upcoming public service event in Washington, D.C., where several civilians and emergency workers would be recognized. Daniel initially wanted to decline. He couldn't afford a hotel. He didn't own a suit. Then Emma said, "Mom would make you go." Daniel laughed. "She would." She'd say you're being stubborn. That sounded exactly like Rachel. So Daniel accepted. He gave permission for the organizers to verify his background and contact his employer, which was why, on the night of his arrest, his name was already inside a federal event security system. At 9:17 p.m., a staff member working with the White House Public Engagement Office noticed a problem while reviewing upcoming guests. Daniel Carter's routine background update had returned an unexpected flag. It showed that he was currently in custody. That didn't mean anything improper had occurred, but it was unusual enough for the staff member to contact the sheriff's department to confirm whether the invited Daniel Carter was the same person. At 9:41, the phone rang at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Martin Hale was preparing to leave for the night. A deputy knocked on his door. Sheriff Hale looked up. "What is it? You need to take this call." The deputy looked almost confused. The White House Sheriff Hay thought he was joking. He wasn't. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. No threats were made. Nobody demanded Daniel's release. The caller simply explained that Daniel James Carter was an expected guest at an upcoming federal recognition event and asked the sheriff's office to confirm his identity because their records showed him in custody. Sheriff Hale opened Daniel's file again. This time, he looked closer. Daniel James Carter. The warrant, Daniel Robert Carter. Same birth month. Same birth year. Same first and last name, but the warrant listed a scar on the left forearm. Daniel had no scar. The wanted man was listed as 2 inches shorter than. Hale noticed something worse. The social security numbers did not match. Only the last 4 digits had been entered into the initial local system, and an old clerical error had linked the wrong full identity record. Sheriff Hale immediately stood up. Get his fingerprints compared manually. A deputy called the neighboring county. This time, nobody sent an email or waited for the morning shift. They called a supervisor directly. 22 minutes later, the answer came back. Wrong man. Sheriff Hale stared at the computer screen. Daniel had been telling them the truth from the first minute. At 10:23 p.m., Daniel heard footsteps approaching his cell. He stood. Sheriff Hale appeared at the door himself. "Mr. Carter." Daniel said nothing. The sheriff removed his glasses. "We made a mistake." Daniel stared at him. "What? You're being released." Daniel didn't move. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Can I go home to my kids?" "Yes." Daniel looked down. His hand started shaking. For hours, he had been angry. Now he suddenly felt exhausted. A deputy returned his belongings. Wallet, keys, belt, phone. Phone. Daniel turned the phone on. 20-3 missed calls. Then he saw Noah's voicemail. He played it. "Dad, Emma thinks she did something wrong because you didn't come." Daniel stopped walking. The hallway blurred through his tears. For the first time that night, he openly cried. Not because he had been arrested, not because he had been embarrassed, but because his children had spent the night believing their father might not come home, and there was nothing he could do to give those hours back. Sheriff Hale offered Daniel a ride home. Daniel almost refused. Then he realized the company truck was still parked where he had been arrested, so he accepted. The drive was quiet after several minutes. The sheriff spoke. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry." Daniel looked out the window. "People didn't listen to me. I know. I told them my middle name was different. I know. I told them to check the numbers. I know." Daniel finally looked at him. "My daughter stood outside her school waiting for me." Sheriff Hale had no response to that. Daniel continued. "Don't care about your apology tonight. I care that this doesn't happen to someone else." The sheriff nodded slowly. "That's fair." When the cruiser reached Daniel's house, the porch light was on. Before the vehicle completely stopped, the front door opened. Emma ran outside in her pajamas. Daniel barely had time to step out before she wrapped both arms around him, dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry." Emma squeezed him tighter. "You came back. I told you I would." Noah walked outside more slowly. He had been trying all evening to act like an adult, but when Daniel opened one arm toward him, Noah ran forward too. For several seconds, Daniel held both of his children on the front lawn. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the doorway wiping her eyes. Sheriff Hale remained beside his car. Then Emma noticed him. She moved closer to Daniel. "Is he taking you again?" Daniel immediately shook his head. "No, nobody is taking me anywhere." Sheriff Hale heard her. His face changed. He took a few steps toward the family, but stopped at a respectful distance. "Emma." She looked at him. "I'm Sheriff Hale." Emma said nothing. "I want you to know your dad didn't do anything wrong." She tightened her grip on Daniel's arm. "Then why did you put him in jail?" Daniel looked toward the sheriff. It was the question every adult had avoided. Hale answered quietly. "Because we made a mistake." Emma frowned. "My dad says when you make a mistake, you have to fix it." The sheriff nodded. "Your dad is right." Inside the house, Emma immediately ran to the kitchen. The award was still on the table. She brought it to Daniel. Daniel read the words printed across the top. "Kindness Award." He smiled. "I knew you'd get it." "You didn't know." "Yes, I did." "How?" "Because I know you." She smiled for the first time that evening. Then Daniel noticed something taped to the bottom. It was a handwritten note from Emma. For Dad, because you teach me to be kind. Daniel looked away. Noah noticed. Are you crying? No, you definitely are. Something got in my eye. In both eyes. Daniel laughed. And for the first time since the traffic stop, the house felt normal again. But Daniel still had a decision to make. The next morning, his phone began ringing. A local reporter had learned about the mistaken arrest. Then another reporter called. An attorney offered to represent him. Some people encouraged Daniel to sue immediately. Others wanted him to appear on television. Daniel was angry enough to consider all of it. He had every right to demand answers. But before doing anything, he sat at the kitchen table with Noah and Emma. What do you think I should do? He asked. Noah looked surprised. You're asking us. This affected you too. Noah thought for a moment. They should fix their system. Daniel nodded. Emma was eating cereal. They should say sorry they did to us. Daniel paused. No, Emma shrugged. Then they're not finished. That afternoon, Daniel contacted an attorney, not because he wanted revenge, because he wanted accountability. The investigation that followed confirmed the error. An outdated record had incorrectly linked Daniel's identity to another Daniel Carter. Sheriff's Department also admitted that deputies could have resolved the discrepancy much earlier by checking the full identification information instead of waiting on an electronic confirmation. Sheriff Hale announced changes to department procedure. When names and birth dates matched an outstanding warrant but other identifying information differed, deputies would now be required to conduct additional verification before extended detention whenever circumstances allowed. The department also reviewed hundreds of older warrant records for similar errors. A few weeks later, Sheriff Hale visited Daniel's home. This time, he wasn't wearing his uniform. Daniel met him on the porch. I wanted to tell you personally, Hale said. The new procedures are active. Daniel nodded. Good. Hale hesitated. I know that doesn't erase what happened. No, I know. Daniel looked through the window. Emma and Noah were doing homework at the table. I spent most of that night angry at you, Daniel said. I understand, but then I realized something. What if my kids learn anything from watching me deal with this? I don't want it to be that anger is the only way to handle being wronged. Sheriff Hale listened quietly. Daniel continued. I want them to see that you can stand up for yourself without becoming the thing that hurt you. The sheriff nodded. I hope I would teach my children the same thing. Daniel extended his hand. The sheriff looked surprised then. He shook it. That didn't make them friends. It didn't erase the jail cell. It didn't remove the fear from Emma's memory or the voicemail Noah had left. Forgiveness wasn't pretending something hadn't happened. For Daniel, it simply meant refusing to let one terrible night decide what kind of man he would become. 2 months later, Daniel and his children traveled to Washington. Daniel rented a suit. Noah complained about wearing a tie. Emma wore the nicest dress she owned and carried a small photograph of her mother in her purse. During the public service ceremony, Daniel stood beside firefighters, teachers, nurses, emergency volunteers, and other ordinary people who had helped strangers during difficult moments. When Daniel's name was called, he walked forward. Emma whispered loudly to Noah, "That's our dad." Noah smiled. I know. Daniel received a small medal and certificate recognizing his actions during the flood. But when the ceremony ended, he didn't immediately look at the medal. He looked for his children. They ran toward him. Emma touched the medal. Is this why the White House called the sheriff? In a way, so this medal got you out of jail. Daniel shook his head. No, she looked confused. The phone call made them look closer. The truth got me out. Emma considered that. Then she smiled. I like that better. So do I. They walked outside together at the bottom of the steps. Noah stopped. Dad. Yeah. Do you think Mom would be proud? Daniel looked at his son. Then at Emma. Then up at the bright afternoon sky. He thought about Rachel. About the hospital. About raising 2 children alone. About fixing shoes with tape, burning toast. Missing Emma's ceremony. Sitting in that cell. Coming home, standing up for himself. Choosing not to live. Angry, his eyes filled again. I think she'd be proud of all 3 of us. Emma reached for his hand. Noah took the other, and Daniel understood something he hadn't understood before. Being a good father. That wasn't about making sure nothing bad ever happened to his children. He couldn't promise them that. Life had already proven it. Being a good father meant showing them what to do when life became unfair. Tell the truth. Stand your ground. Protect your family. Demand what is right. But don't allow anger to take away the person you worked so hard to become. That night, back at the hotel, Emma placed Daniel's medal on the nightstand beside it. She placed her kindness award. Daniel laughed. What are you doing? Putting our awards together. Yours is better. No, yours is. Noah looked over from the other bed. They're 4 completely different things. Emma rolled her eyes. I know. Then she looked at Daniel. But Dad, yeah, you still owe me an award celebration. Daniel smiled. Right? with chocolate cake deal and ice cream now you're negotiating. Emma grinned. Daniel switched off the light. In the darkness, he heard his children quietly talking to each other. For years, he had worried that he wasn't enough for them without Rachel, that maybe one parent could never fill the space left by two. But that night he finally understood he didn't have to replace their mother. He only had to keep showing up as their father. Some days he would get it right, some days he would burn breakfast, forget laundry, lose a shoe, or make the wrong decision. And sometimes life itself would stop him from keeping a promise. But love wasn't measured by one missed afternoon. It was measured by all the mornings he got up again, all the dinners he cooked, all the bills he quietly worried about, all the times he listened, all the sacrifices his children might not understand until they were older. And all the times he found his way home.